services that I touched on and how they might provide benefit to transit users in our region. And all of that will come together in a long-term vision for DART services. This is just an overview of the timeline for the study. We've been looking at existing conditions. I'm going to share some of those with you tonight. So right now we're really focusing on public input, wanting to hear from as many folks as possible in response to some of the information I'll share, but also in terms of those needs, individual needs. And then over the summer, we're going to be drafting some recommendations, working with our consultant team and the DART Commission to develop recommendations that can be responsive to that public feedback and that detailed analysis that we've done. We'll then bring those recommendations back out for public input, probably in about September, and then take that public input, refine the concepts, and put them into a final plan by the end of the calendar year. So now I'm going to just go through some brief existing conditions, and then I'm going to pause and drink my water, and you guys can hopefully talk to me a little bit and respond to some of the things that I'm sharing. In terms of existing conditions, these are our bus routes, as I shared before, and also ridership. So the larger the blue dot, the more ridership at a given bus stop. And so, as I said at the top, not all bus routes are created equal. We do have bus routes in each of our member communities, but some of those bus routes only operate on weekdays. Some of them only operate during commute times. On the next slide, I'm going to get into more detail about Ankeny and and Polk County, Northern Des Moines specifically. But some of the key trends to point out as we look at ridership are that a lot of the ridership happens, towards the central part of our region, in and around Des Moines. A lot of the ridership happens on some of the busy corridors like University and Hubble, some of the corridors on the south side and north side of Des Moines. But also we see big pockets of ridership at commercial centers across our region, looking at Valley West Mall and Jordan Creek Mall and Southridge Mall, and also at park and rides, where commuters often drive, park at a parking lot, get on a DART bus, and come into Des Moines. So you see some of those park and ride dots pop up in Clive, in Ankeny, in Altoona, and in Johnston. This is a more close-up view of ridership that we're seeing in Ankeny, in and around Ankeny. So on the left, that's our fixed route bus ridership. That's those larger buses that operate on a set time and a set schedule. We have a couple of routes that serve Ankeny. The one that generates the most ridership is Route 98. That's an express route that has limited stops in Ankeny before getting on the freeway and taking 35 down into Des Moines. That service mostly operates during the peak hours, during the peak commute hours. However, there are also some trips in the middle of the day and in the afternoon, just less frequently. And it's really designed primarily for commuters, but we've actually seen also increasing use by DMAC students, going back and forth between the DMAC campus in Ankeny and the DMAC campus in Des Moines, as well as even some use from folks who live in Des Moines and may work in Ankeny. In particular, I'll draw your attention to, it's not labeled, but there's a bus stop here on Orlabor Road near the Produce Distributors, PDI, that we know has a regular ridership from folks coming from Des Moines working in Ankeny. So that's Route 98 that does this loop here. You'll see the biggest ridership, of course, on Route 98 is the park and ride at the Mercy North campus. That's where we have a designated parking for DART customers. The reason it's the number one bus stop in Ankeny is that right after the bus picks up here, it gets on the freeway and comes right into Des Moines. And so really we're talking about comparable travel times if you were to drive in, and then especially when you factor in parking, as many people have to park in parking garages once they get to downtown versus just stepping out of DART many times on the doorstep of their office. It's no wonder that so many Ankeny residents do choose to ride from that park and ride. Oops, went a little too fast. The other route that we have serving this area is Route 4. And so this is a local route that operates throughout the day with several trips. So most of the day it's going in and out of Park Fair Mall in Des Moines, but then several trips throughout the day it does come up and serve job sites, the Polk County Jail, DZ, all the way up to the Hy-Vee commissary. This is a route that was extended actually multiple times over the last few years as we got more and more requests from employers up this way. And when the Hy-Vee commissary opened in, I believe it was 2019, I could get that wrong, they definitely sat down with us and wanted to make sure that they had ridership, that they had a bus stop on their property with service that was tailored to their shift times, so that they could make sure that that transportation wasn't a barrier to employment for them as they were hiring so many people there at that facility. And then the other service I want to touch on is what we call our on-call shuttle, the Ankeny on-call, and that's the map over here on the right. This is a little bit of a different model. This is a point-to-point service, meaning that we show up at the curb of your home and take you to wherever you're going, and then pick you back up again and bring you home. It operates by reservation. It doesn't operate on really a set time, although it does only operate from 9 to 4 on weekdays. So this is a service that's really more designed to help people run their errands, and you can see that in the key destinations. That's a heat map. So the brighter the color, the yellows and the reds have more ridership, and so those pockets of ridership are at Hy-Vee, at healthcare, places where people are running errands, and we see a lot of seniors utilizing this service. Although we're also right now studying and we've proposed enhancements to this service so that it can be more on demand, and that you don't have to call a day ahead of time to book that service. That's something that's been proposed, and we're in the planning stages for, so that we can expand the hours of the service and provide more mobility for residents in Ankeny and those seeking to get to jobs in Ankeny. So I've said a lot. I want to pause there and just touch on, just to summarize a few key points, that we know that there's a need to connect housing and jobs, that in particular in some of our suburban communities, we hear from residents, especially Des Moines residents who are trying to get jobs out in suburban communities, that the bus services that we have are just not set up to serve those needs, that the regional travel patterns have evolved so that not everybody is commuting into Des Moines for work, that really there's a lot of cross-regional commuting, cross-regional service needs that people need to get to, that our transit service just isn't designed today to meet. And of course, as those regions are growing, those needs just get even further exacerbated. And so those are some of the things that we want to try to touch on in our study. Sorry, one last thing before I open it up for comment is that COVID-19 impacts. I want to, of course, note that the last year has not been ordinary at all, and that we have seen some ridership declines, but they haven't been equal across our system. We've seen less decline on the weekends than we have on the weekdays. We've seen more decline on express routes serving commuters who typically travel into downtown Des Moines than we have on our local routes. And so what that indicates to us is that a lot of our riders are probably essential workers, those who did not have an option to work from home, but who we rely on nonetheless to take care of our loved ones, to make sure that our food is prepared, and that our grocery stores remain open, and that our businesses that produce products for our consumption stay operating. And so we definitely heard from employers and from our riders throughout the pandemic that it was important for them to keep riding, even when there were closures of some businesses, urging from public health professionals to maintain social distance and limit you going about in public. We did still see ridership on our routes. So now I just want to open it up for comments. Anything that I said that resonated with you, or that you want to build on and add to. I'm gonna keep moving in my presentation. Like I said, I just have about 10 more minutes of sharing, and then we'll have more time for discussion. Certainly no rush, but want to make sure I get to share what I wanted to share. So we've talked a little bit about some of the existing conditions. Now I kind of want to give you an overview of where we're going with this. Really, our ultimate goal in planning transportation services is to get people where they need to go, We also know that we want to minimize their waiting time and their travel time, get them there quickly, and also make sure that bus stops are safe and convenient and comfortable, so that people can feel comfortable riding the bus. And so the question is kind of what, and this maybe drives at some of the questions that were asked is how do we get there, and what are some of the factors that we take into consideration when we're coming up with our recommendations. I started to list off some of the data analysis that we've been doing. As I mentioned, we have a consultant team that's helping us look at our ridership. We're looking at the on-time performance of our buses, because reliability is very important to making sure that people can rely on our service. We look at the underlying costs of the services we provide. We look at how land use looks today and how it's evolving into the future. We look at demographics, recognizing that some populations are more reliant on transit. We also look at some of those underlying travel patterns that I mentioned. On top of that analysis, we also are talking to our customers and our stakeholders, looking back at public requests that we've received over the years, the survey that we're doing right now that's already collected close to 800 responses. We also do targeted outreach with local businesses, those that partner with DART today to provide transportation for their employees, but also others that we know have transit needs that we work with on a regular basis to make sure that we're hearing from them and responding to their needs. And then some of the other more traditional ways that we do outreach to social media, public meetings, and so on. And so all that will come into to how we plan our service, which can take different shapes and forms. I'm going to talk next about some of the types of service and how we can evolve beyond just the model of fixed route transit and our call ahead on-call service, to think about different service delivery types, serving different times of the day, how frequent the buses come, where they go to. All of those items are things that we're working on. So as we look to the future, we know that fixed route bus service, those buses that operate on a set time and a set schedule, are going to be the most efficient way to carry people. The more people you can get on one vehicle with one driver is going to be the best bang for the buck. However, that service is most effective along busy corridors, and especially where there's more density of housing, density of jobs, destinations along a common corridor. All those things drive ridership and drive the need and the efficiency of that big bus. But as we know, that need is not uniform across the whole region. And so what we want to do is we want to think about how can we bring together the various types of services that are available, operated by DART, and those that aren't operated by DART, but that we can partner with to cater a more flexible type of service to meet those needs. And so I have some additional pictures here. The one in the upper right shows a rideshare vehicle, something like an Uber or a Lyft, where customers can order a trip over their mobile phone, get picked up and driven door to door. Those same technologies can actually be applied to transit vehicles through a concept called microtransit. And that's what the picture is meant to represent in the lower left. We've already made a recommendation to the DART Commission to establish a microtransit service in Ankeny, where we would build on that on-call service, but allow some of those mobile features so that people can order their trip when they need it, where they need to go, pay for it over the mobile phone, or still pay for it on the bus if they want. And it can be done on a vehicle that's wheelchair equipped, that has a trained, friendly DART driver to do that. And so in our mind, that could be a good meld between the reliability, safety, consistency of transit with the flexibility of those on-demand type services. And lastly, I'll just touch on bike sharing. We've heard that DART doesn't operate the local bike share system, but we've heard that bike share has done well during the pandemic. More people have taken to active transportation, to getting outside, and that there's plans to grow that system and even to incorporate electric bicycles. By incorporating electric bicycles, that then extends the distance that you can ride. And so we want to think about how can that system interact with the transit system so that people can get where they need to go. And so this is just a kind of a flavor of some of the types of recommendations that you might expect to see in this plan. The first is just to look at our existing routes and think about how we can build on those routes, whether it's responding to customers' requests for more frequent service, or to go to areas that we don't currently serve, or to focus on the bus stops and the quality of those bus stops and making sure that there's safe waiting areas, places for people to get sheltered from the elements, but also places that connect multiple modes. All those modes that I talked about that customers and residents are choosing more and more. How can we build places that accommodate all those modes, that have a place for people to get picked up and dropped off from their rideshare vehicle, that have a park and ride, area, that have bike share, and how do all those things come together to support transit and provide people the mobility that they're looking for? And then also think about how we can use some of those flexible on-demand services to enhance or even replace transit. I mentioned that example in Urbandale where we've already identified and implemented a pilot project to replace a route that didn't have a high ridership, and it actually made more sense to provide Ubers and yellow cabs. So we want to look at other places in the region where that might be the right approach. We also think that these types of services can enhance access to bus stops in places, especially where destinations are not close to existing bus stops, or maybe the infrastructure isn't there for people to walk safely to bus stops because of the road topology and pedestrian safety and things like that. So what we call first mile, last mile solutions, getting people to and from the bus stops using some of these flexible alternatives. And then lastly is to think about unmet needs. I mentioned areas where our region is growing, areas where there's jobs and housing today that we just don't reach. In particular, where those needs are where it's lower density, where we don't have quite as many needs. Some of the needs are still there, and it might make more sense to do rides individually using some of these modes as opposed to having a bus on a set time and a set schedule, because that's not always efficient if depending on the number of people that are riding. And so, for example, when we think about some of the needs that were discussed earlier on in the presentation about some of those local needs within Ankeny and those regional needs across the region, getting into downtown, getting around, some of these types of services, including what we've proposed for the Ankeny On-Call, we think could help to meet those local needs. Although when we start to talk about those longer distance needs and serving more destinations with higher numbers of people trying to get there, like downtown, that's where probably the fixed route bus, the bigger vehicle, set time, set schedule is going to be a better fit. And so it's really just about how can we align the tools that we have with the needs that we're hearing from the community. And so lastly, I'll close with just a reminder of the timeline for the study. We're going to take this public input. We're going to work on some draft recommendations over the summer. We're going to come back out in the fall, share those recommendations. That's where I hope to be able to have another meeting just like this. Maybe we'll even be meeting at the library in Ankeny in person by that point, so that we can share some of those, so we can share those recommendations and hear from you. Were we able to be responsive to what we heard? Where we still have gaps? Where do we need to keep pushing? And then all of that will get wrapped into a plan by the end of the calendar year. Lastly, I'll just say again, if you haven't taken that survey, please do go to ridedart.com/plan. Take our survey. It should only take you about 10 minutes, and that really helps us document the needs and understand in more detail.